There we are. Come on in, everybody.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
All right.
Good.
Took me a little to get in, but here I am.
Well, I was having a little trouble too because for some reason it kept saying I wasn't online, and that's kind of unusual here at Good Natured World Headquarters. We usually do pretty good connections here, and was saying, you know, I kept getting the spinny circles and everything, but looks like we're good to go.
Good. Well, we're here, so glad it worked out.
Well, and I've got tech support puppy, and I've got the senior member too. My dog Joey came along tonight, so the usual disruptions. It's their fault, not mine.
Kids nowadays.
Of course.
Well, we got a whole lot to, and I'm going to try doing a little something different too with using not just slides. I've got some actual objects here I'm going to try and share too. So we'll see how that goes as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like just about everybody's here, and if not, I've got it set so they can just join in as we move along here. We'll get our slides up first. And we'll just go through the pictures. I don't think I'll start the audio because you've all heard it before and it's just some background music. We're going to jump in with what last week's topic was, which was squirrels and black walnuts. And I got to tell you, I saw this squirrel behind Potawatomi, and I really thought it had been injured. It's got this stain around its mouth that from a distance looked like blood. And I thought, oh my gosh, did it get in a fight? What's the deal? And then I zoomed in and I got this photo and I could see it's not blood at all. It's the stain from a black walnut. It's that time of the year. And black walnuts, if you've ever handled them, you get all that stain on your hands. There's a lot of chemicals in the plant. We talked about black walnuts several weeks ago and how they kind of almost killed one of my hydrangeas at home. Well, they've also got a lot of pigment in them that contributes to their name, black walnut. Historically, the nut was used, wasn't gathered just for food, but also it was used as a dye, both by Native Americans and then also by the settlers that came here. It produces kind of a yellowish brown dye, not truly black. Although when you get the stain on your hands, you do get kind of a lasting, several days lasting stain of black on your fingers. And it's just kind of a sign that the squirrels, that's one of their main food sources when we have a big walnut year, which is almost every year. Black walnuts, every once in a while we'll have a low mast year for them, but they are pretty good producers almost every year around here. And squirrels are uniquely positioned to take advantage of that because they're pretty large rodent. They've got those classic rodent incisors that are very, very sharp and can cut through that tough walnut shell. This is a tree out at Primrose Farm, and you can see just how loaded down it is with walnuts. When the walnuts are on the tree, they look like this. They've got this green husk, and it's kind of bitter. And if you've ever picked a walnut at this stage, you can get a little bit of stain on your hands. If you rub it around, the stain will produce kind of a yellowish color on your fingers. And it also produces a citrus smell that refer back to in a couple of slides. Now, I don't have actual documentation on this. It's kind of more of a folklore that's been handed down, but these walnuts, besides being gathered for food, were also used back in the day as kind of a homespun version of mothballs. You could put them, store them with your clothing, and that chemical in the walnut that produces that citrus-like smell will also help repel insects, and it will also kind of give a fresh aroma in a drawer. So back when we didn't really have good indoor plumbing facilities, baths weren't a regular part of people's routines, they could keep their clothes smelling somewhat fresh by putting fresh, when the walnuts were still green, picking them and putting them in the drawer where they kept you know, their clothing to add that citrus smell to them. As the walnut ages, that green husk turns brown, and this is where the people would use that husk to produce a dye. You could put these walnuts in a vat of water, and the black dye would ooze out, and then you could color cloth with it. And but the squirrels themselves, they're not so much interested in the dye as they are in the nut itself. This was a walnut. I thought, if you see a walnut just laying around like this these days, I took this picture the other day at Mount St. Mary's. When you see a walnut like that, chances are it's been invaded. There's a lot of insects that can, weevils and such, that can get inside of the nut and eat the meat itself. Squirrels can sense that, so they might you know, find a walnut, but they can usually tell by smelling, and I think I can tell by weight too. If a walnut seems light for its size, chances are there's no good nut meat left inside of it anymore. It's just, well, the technical term for insect poop, which is frass. You can cut, open these up, and the walnut meat will either be gone completely or it'll be shriveled, and there'll be a powdery substance, which would be the insect droppings that were left behind. So most of the walnuts now are being buried. Squirrels, you know, we used to think, oh, a squirrel will, you know, they'll bury a bunch of nuts, and then, you know, if they find them again, it's just kind of random luck. Maybe they'll find them by scent. But a lot of research indicates that squirrels actually remember they have a really good part of their brain that checks spatial memory, and they can remember, well, you know, I planted this nut, it was between the tree and the rock, or it was over next to the fence, and they'll actually remember where they put them, and they'll go and dig them up. Now, it doesn't happen, they don't have 100% recall, and that's why we have walnut trees popping up in our yards pretty frequently. I would say every year I've got 2 or 3 new walnut trees that show up in my yard, even though the walnut bearing tree in the neighborhood is not in my yard, but the squirrels will carry them and bury them, and then forget where a few of them have been placed. Now, I tossed this picture, and referring back to the chemical makeup of the walnut and that citrus insect repellent quality that they have, that citrus odor and that quality. I don't know the name of the chemical that causes this, but birds, particularly grackles, the grackles are pretty good sized birds, and they're one of the local species that takes advantage of that insect repellent quality. I've seen this at Norris Woods and at Delnor Woods, where grackles will take a walnut husk that's still green, and they'll kind of peck into it with their bill, and then they'll take those portions of the husk and they'll run it through their feathers. That's similar to another behavior that a lot of birds do called anting. Maybe we should probably do a segment on that sometime. Anting is where birds will take ants And they'll either lay down on an anthill and let the ants run over them, or they'll actually pick the ants up with their bill and run them through their feathers. But ants create formic acid, which is also an insect repellent and insecticide. And they will use that to clean the lice and all the other grungy things that can accumulate on feathers over time. But look for this behavior. It's a little late this year to find walnuts with the green husk still, but remember to check that out next year. Usually in August and September, these nuts are green, they're plentiful. And by that time, the birds in this area have a pretty good array of insects of their own on their in their feathers, and they'll use that walnut chemical to clean themselves up. It's kind of cool. It's a neat behavior to keep an eye out for. I also wanted to point out that as we get into winter, you can still tell a walnut tree even if there's no walnuts. And the walnut bark is fairly distinctive, but the giveaway on walnut trees, particularly young ones where the bark isn't quite as developed, you can look at the twigs and see these are the leaf scars that are on this walnut twig. Does that remind you of anything? Two eyes, nose. Some people call it the owl face. I've always heard it referred to as the monkey face. So you can tell that you're looking at a walnut tree, even if there's no walnuts around, by looking for those distinctive leaf scars and looking for the monkey face. So just another kind of a cool thing that you can have fun with your local walnut trees. Now, some of you might remember a few weeks ago, I was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and first I heard this distinctive sound, and then I looked way up in the sky and I saw this V. So the sandhill crane migration has started. I haven't heard, and maybe some of you have, but we're just right at the beginning of when they might be appearing here in Illinois. But they tend to fly in V's, and we often associate Canada geese with flying in V's. But it's an efficient way to cover a lot of ground, well, from up in the sky, and that those lead birds will break through the air current, and then the trailing birds can take advantage of that, and they move along way high up in the sky. I remember several years ago we were doing one of our forest ecology field trips over at Delnor Woods Park, and a flock of migrating sandhills went over. This was right before Halloween, and I pointed up in the sky and I go, "Oh, look, guys, there's sandhill cranes flying." And there was a dad that was along with the group as a chaperone, and he looked up in the sky. He's like, "You don't know what those birds. There's no way you can see what those birds are." I said, "Yeah, you don't have to see them. One, if you can hear them, and two, if you know that is their typical behavior at this time of the year." Now, if they're a little bit lower, you can get a better look at them, and this is also going to clue you in that these are not geese. Sandhills fly with their legs stretched out behind them and their necks stretched out in front of them. Geese have the neck stretched out in front, but they don't have the long legs to drag behind. So that's another giveaway that you're looking at cranes and not geese. What they're doing is heading south. We'll look at that range map here in just a minute, but they are going to come down in small groups, sometimes in very large groups. Here in our highly agricultural state of Illinois, they come down and they forage. Sometimes they're looking for grain, sometimes they're looking for insects. They also eat things like burrowing crayfish. This was a video that was sent to me on November 4th from couple of years ago. Let's see if I can get. This is a local family who looked out, heard the distinctive sound in their yard and looked out. And I think altogether there were a couple dozen cranes that had come down for a landing, take a little rest, get a drink, and find something to eat there in the yard. So here's a look at the bigger picture. Now, in our area, we do have nesting sandhill cranes, which is kind of a triumph considering that not too many years ago, I'm going to say 20 years ago or so, sandhill cranes were an endangered species in Illinois. They were not a federally endangered species, but they were considered endangered here in the state. Now, a lot of protections come along with being endangered. Namely, there's no hunting allowed, and even though their habitat loss was one of the driving reasons behind their being endangered, they nest in wetlands, and of course our wetlands are always, a lot of them are being drained and being turned into things that aren't wet anymore, like housing subdivisions and shopping malls and things like that. But they have waged a comeback. Taking the hunting pressure off allowed their numbers to start to grow. Wisconsin has a very large sandhill crane population, and I would say within about the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, we've started seeing increasing numbers of sandhill cranes that are actually breeding in our area. But they don't stick around for the winter time. They do head south, and the sandhill cranes in our area go down to Florida. There are other subspecies of sandhills that have different migration patterns, but you can see the ones by us are going to be heading in a southeasterly direction with an eye towards landing in Georgia and down into Florida. Now, it's always kind of fun, and when the cranes are way up high, this is you're going to need some good binoculars to do this, but always pay attention when you see a large flock of migrating cranes, because you might luck out and catch sight of a whooping crane or two. Whooping cranes are still critically endangered and federally endangered, but there are some efforts geared towards bringing back their numbers, and sometimes they will join a flock. Remember, there's always safety in numbers, so a sandhill crane will join in with a group of migrating sandhill cranes. A whooping crane will join the sandhills and fly south. I don't remember if this was 2018 or 2017, but two were actually spotted with a group of sandhills over at Peck Farm in Geneva. So the large group of birds is always worth a second look, because you just never know who else might be joining in that migration party. So besides looking up in the sky, it's also the time of year that you want to look down. There's all kinds of cool things that are popping up, and I was actually kind of excited. It's not a very nice night out. I was just out with the dogs, and it is raining. It is quite chilly, but things have been so dry lately. But fall fungus is a phenomenon around here. Last week we talked about hen of the woods. I mentioned chicken of the woods. This week we're going to talk about giant puffballs, and there's a lot of people shy away from foraging for mushrooms because so many of them are poisonous. Some of them make you sick. Some of them can kill you. You really want to make sure you know what you're doing. But there are a few species that are really impossible to confuse with anything else, and one of them is the giant puffball. Now these, we get a little rain like we're having now, and then I heard on Thursday, I think, of this week, it's supposed to be up in the 70s again. So we're kind of getting some really good condition for puffball formation. These giant puffballs are True to their name, they can be giant. This was a selection I saw. This was at Red Oak Nature Center in October of 2018. I believe I took these 3 pictures. Small, medium, and large. The small one was about the size of a 16-inch softball. The medium one here was the size of a volleyball, and this large one here was approaching the size of a basketball. Now, to eat them, you want to make sure that they are, first of all, white and firm. If you don't want to have them be spongy at all, because that means that they are starting to get beyond the point where they're tasty or safe to eat. If you slice into a giant puffball, it almost looks like white bread or tofu. I've heard a lot of people make the analogy that giant puffballs are like tofu. I found I've eaten a few of them. They're not super flavorful, which can be good. Just like tofu, you could cook tofu in garlic and it tastes garlicky, and you can dip tofu in an egg batter and fry it and put syrup on it. You can do the same with a giant puffball. It will absorb the flavors of whatever you're cooking it with. The consistency is, the texture of it is a little bit softer and a little bit chewier than, say, some of the mushrooms you might like the white mushrooms you get in the grocery store. Some people do not care for the texture of the giant puffball, but even if you don't eat them, they are just really cool. And if you're out for a walk in a wooded area, keep your eye open for these things. I know, unfortunately, they are somewhat irresistible to kids who like to kick them. And once they've been kicked around, they're not so good to eat either. But even just taking them in for what they are, an organism that is living underneath the ground. This is the way it reproduces. It puts the part that we would call the mushroom up above the ground. That turns into spores, which then disperse. And we're talking billions of spores will disperse, and then ensure that we have giant puffballs again next year. So keep an eye open for these when you're out and rambling around. So now we're gonna switch gears again. We haven't done a reader email in some time, and I got this email the other day. Here's a new bird. This is a frequent reader, frequent writer. He's always looking at the things in his neighborhood over in Geneva. We saw him or her at a small pond across the street from Heartland Elementary School. Despite the fact that we were just 10 feet away, these photos aren't the best. You'll see the photo in just a minute. He or she wasn't the least bit afraid of us being that close with our 2 dogs either, which isn't very heron-like. So he or she had a brown topside with a light mottled underside. At first I thought it might be another Dunlin, but it wasn't that stocky. It has that heron posture. This is the fellow that wrote us about the juvenile black-crowned night heron from a couple of months ago. All right, you ready? We're gonna take a look at this. I wanna see if anybody recognizes this bird. Ready? So he apologized in the email. He's getting a new cell phone soon. Anybody want to take a crack at what this bird might be? It's got a classic fish stalking posture. It's a long shell. Yep.
Green heron.
Ding, 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 ding. Here's a slightly clearer shot of it. A green heron. Now these birds are on their way out for the season. I don't know of any green herons that stick around in the winter, just because of, we do have great blue herons that stick around in the wintertime, but they have longer legs. They can wade into water, but it's a little bit deeper and maybe not as apt to freeze as the shallow edges of water where the green herons tend to hang out. So the one that was spotted by our reader Jeff probably is not in the area anymore. Although I must say I have not been out birding recently in a good green heron habitat to find out if any are still here. But they will be leaving soon if they are still here. Cool, neat looking little birds. Very you can be standing next to one and not even realize it. As Jeff wrote in his email, he was close by and it didn't budge. They adopt a very stiff posture that, let's go back to his picture. You know, they're scanning the shallows, looking for small fish or crayfish or even a small frog to grab. Great stalking behaviors you can see when you watch a green heron doing its thing. But anyway, good job on that. We'll have some more reader emails next week. I've been getting a lot of cool pictures of, can you name this? So I'll share some more of those next week. But I'm gonna actually stop the share here for a little bit because let's see, there we go. So have you ever seen those on YouTube? They have the unboxing videos. Pretty much every hobby, there's a, you know, I just got this cool new video game, or I just got this new, I happen to collect antique smoking pipes, and the pipe guys love to unbox their latest find that they found at a, you know, on eBay or an estate sale. So I actually got an email from a coworker next door here at the Baker Center, and she said, I'm sending over a snake skin. So I thought it would be fun to take a look at the snake skin and see if we can figure out what it is. And I did get some follow-up information from her later, but let's open it up. It says on the outside, it's funny, this is from Heather Feeney, who works over in the admin department. She's cleaning out her house because she and her husband are downsizing. And this was something that her neighbor had shared with her kids. Heather's kids are all grown now. So she said this was probably 8 or 10 years ago. Let's take a look at it. I don't know if we've ever shared a snake skin here before. Snake skins themselves are really cool. You can a lot of times tell a lot about the snake by the skin it leaves behind. For one thing, up here, I'm gonna hold this up. Snakes, you see those 2 dots right here and right there? Snakes, when they shed their skin, the whole outer covering comes up, all the skin cells, including the eye caps that protect the eyes, they come off. And then by looking at the colors on the skin, you can sometimes see patterns. I made this several years ago. This is, let's see, let's turn it around here. Can you see the patterns on these snake skins? We've got a fox snake, a water snake, and a garter snake that I put on some plexiglass. Down here you can see the stripe on the garter snake, and you can see the splotches here on the fox snake. You can kind of see the bands here on the water snake too. You can also tell that this was a very thick snake and this is a thinner snake. There's lots of things that you can tell. One thing, you can get an idea of the size of the snake from the skin, but any skin that you find is always going to be bigger than the snake that shed it, because when a snake's scales are on, like that, are on the snake, they're overlapping, but there's the skin, actually the scales do this. So when the shed comes off, the scales stretch out and stay stretched. So you're gonna end up with more skin than you do snake. Does that make sense? The skin, because the scales overlap when they're on the snake, but when they come off, they're stretched out. So this, looks like this this has probably been in Heather's kid's closet for years. This skin is very light.
Miss Pam, I have to ask you because I guess I never really thought about it. I thought that they open up kind of like a cicada and come out. They don't?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, so they, yeah, but they pop up starting at the head. And this was a nice complete shed too. Sometimes snakes in captivity have trouble shedding their skin because it might not be humid enough in their enclosure. But yeah, it does start up on the head. So it pops up, yep, but it stays intact. And then it actually peels off. The other thing with snake skin is it's like, you know, when you peel a sock off inside out, my mom used to hate that. She always made me put my socks back, you know, right side out again after I took them off. But a snake skin always comes off inside out. So it kind of peels back, and then the snake skin, let's see if I can get this all the way up and this, all right. So we're looking now at the skin, and look at how white it is. This tells me that, so this was probably a very light colored snake. The other thing you can look at is on the scales. I'm going to hold these up here where you can you see these scales. There's no, actually there's just a very fine little bump on each scale. We call that the keel. It's hard to see. I suspected that this was a corn snake because of the light color. 99 out of 100 pet snakes around here are corn snakes anyway. And I asked Heather if she had some more information about that. And let's go back and see what it was that she had to say. And go back to, where's our sharing? Oh, yeah. She sent me this. This is from her neighbor. And this is the snake that shed the skin. His name, oh, let me see if I can make it full screen. Yeah. No, there he is. So this is Killian. And this, when he shed this skin, he was 4 feet, and now he's almost 5 feet long. What Heather gave me in terms of an update is that he's very friendly, but he'll rattle his tail when he gets scared, which is a very common, horn snakes do this. Our local rat snake representative in this area is the fox snake. They do the same thing. In fact, our local fox snakes oftentimes get mistaken for rattlesnakes because our fox snakes are brown, splotchy pattern, rattle the tail. But there's no rattles to make the sound, where they rely on substrate to shake the tail against and make that rattly sound. She says, I feed him in a box separate from his cage. That way he knows that when you reach in his cage, it's not food. And therefore he will not lunge at you as he sometimes does his food. I purchase his mice frozen at the pet store, thaw them to room temperature. She goes on and gives a nice overview of the care of Killian. She really loves her snake because I guess this was the kid's snake, and it turns out the mom was the one who really kind of fell for him. He is, I believe he's 13 years old now, and he's a wonderful pet, very interesting and very low maintenance. So I thought that was kind of a cool endorsement, and it's just, you know, I was out of the office on Friday and again yesterday, and I love coming in and seeing.
Yeah, that's my pet, all right.
Hi.
I'm Killian's owner.
Oh, you are? Oh, hi.
Hi,
What's
I'm
about him?
Heather's next door neighbor, Mary Griffin.
Hi, Mary. Nice for you to join us.
Hey,
Tell
Pam,
us more.
thanks. I thought I would give you a sneak peek of Killian himself. He's just napping,
Awesome. Let's have a look.
but he's a beautiful guy, and kids always like to come over and hold him and play with him, and he's a great little snake. But I did adopt. Could you see him there?
Yeah. That's so
Okay. He yeah, I kind of got him by default. My son in college thought it would be really cool to own a snake. And so he got a snake, and then he kept it for about 3 years and thought, I'm done with that. And I'm an animal lover, so I said, no, you don't do that. So I've taken him on, and I was never a snake lover, but I'm an animal lover, so I've learned to love him. And he's a great pet. He's awesome.
That's so cool. Well, I really appreciate that you shared. And Heather said this was what, 8 years ago or something?
Long time. Yeah, her kids
time
came
ago.
over and wanted to see him, and I said, oh, he just shed his skin. And he's really healthy, so he shed the skin all in one piece, which
Yeah,
I guess is a real good indication they're pretty healthy.
it is.
And I gave it to Luke, one of her sons, and he said, oh, this is so cool. I'm going to take it to school. But I didn't know she still had it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah, she said that she found out like a whole box of nature. So I'm hoping some more of it'll make its way over here. But this was really cool.
Oh, well, cool. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to say hi.
Well, thanks for sharing. Got a whole, Killian's a star. Thank you.
I'll have to tell him. Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Sylvana, I know you were thinking about looking at a pet snake, and I think there's a huge endorsement. If you're
Well, yes, my almost 11-year-old, it's dying to have a snake.
Well.
And it's a daughter, so it's something in our family.
Yeah. Well, I know I learned a lot. I wanted a pet snake for years, and it was not, my family is much more of the cute, fuzzy type of pet family, and they thought, where did we go wrong with this girl? But you learn so much by observing them, and the way they feed. They, even with a pre-killed prey item, they still sometimes will strike at it, sometimes they'll squeeze it. They orient it so they swallow it head first. That whole saying, and now that's a timely reminder now, because it's getting cold out. Mice are trying to get into our houses. Whatever the mouse's head can fit through, the rest of the mouse can fit through too, even though that's a small part of its body. It's the same way when they're feeding. If the snake, if the mouse's head can fit in the snake's mouth, then the rest of the mouse is going to fit in there too, even though it looks like it can't.
It's unbelievable watching.
Yeah, we should try. Maybe I should try and get a video sometime of one of the hickory knoll snakes eating, because how is it? They have no fingers. They have no.
You know what? I put Killian in his feeding box, just a cardboard box, and I have a mouse thawed out from the pet store, just a dead mouse. I drop it in, and he'll kind of circle around depending on how hungry he is. And then he will either lunge at it, or he'll just kind of sniff at it, and he will open his mouth. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, they can open. Some people say they unhinge, and it's actually there's extra. Snakes have extra bones back here that kind of link together. It looks almost like links on a bicycle chain, and they kind of chunk, and they open it up almost 180 to get around that prey item. And then
it's very interesting. It's unbelievable. And then he will go a second, he'll eat a second mouse because of his size. And you can almost see the mouse, in his going down. Like, I know it's terrible, but you can eat. It's interesting though. And then after he feeds, I kind of let him stay in the box for a little bit. because, he is kind of unnerved. He kind of wants to maybe digest. And then I pick him up and put him right back in his cage. But it's a really interesting pet for a young person to own. I would recommend. I mean, corn snakes are, they won't bite. They're pretty, calm, and I don't handle him much, but you could, it's interesting.
Well, and they're, to be like truly domesticated, I forget how many generations of breeding have to occur, but it usually takes decades or hundreds of years for animals to become what we would call domesticated pet. But in terms of snakes, corn snakes are about as close as we come to having a domesticated variety of snake to keep as a pet. And what I find interesting, because we've got some corn snakes out at Hickory Knolls, and then we've got a bull snake, we've got a black rat snake, we've got other snakes that aren't commonly kept as pets, so they're much closer to their wild cousins because they just don't have those generations of breeding behind them. The corn snakes, we had one, sometimes she would take half an hour to eat a mouse. We're very kind of lackadaisical about it, and we just kind of, they
play with it.
Their lower jaw actually is not connected the way our lower jaw is. So they can use it to walk, they can manipulate the two sides of their lower jaw to pull the prey down into their throat, and then the muscles take over, and the muscles will ripple the mouse then down into the digestive system. But our snakes that are a little bit more wild, they'll eat a mouse in under 5 minutes, which kind of makes sense. If you're feeding in the wild, you have a chance of becoming prey yourself. A hawk could come down and grab you if you're a snake, and you have to get that food down quickly so that you can then go to a place of refuge to digest. Whereas corn snakes, they're losing that instinct because they've been bred. And Killian, by the way, is beautiful. Heather said,
thank you.
Candy cane.
I was just going to pull him out and see if he wanted to say hi again. I was reaching into his cage, but like I said, he's very easy. He's kind of, but he's a long drink of water.
He is. And to get those kind of colors, that takes generations of breeding and corn snake breeders, they do strive for these different patterns and color combinations. And it was a albino candy cane or something like that.
Albino candy cane. Yes.
Yeah.
And he was purchased years ago. I was with my son when he bought him, and it was at Critters Pet Store. I don't know if you remember Critters.
Sure, when it was over here on Main Street.
Yep. And he was as big as a pencil. That's as big as this guy was. And he just, with a lot of good care, he's grown and grown. I think he started out, Patrick fed him the little pinkies, and then he's now on to the, two medium mice a day, or every 2 weeks.
That's
every 2 weeks.
awesome.
So, but he's, like I said, he's pretty, like
he looks good on you. I like the contrast.
he's very inquisitive. Is this the young lady that's interested in a snake?
Yes.
I wish you could come by and let her play with him, because no one takes him out anymore. He's very bored.
Don't say that twice. She cannot hear you. I have earphones. You say that and she will be there in a flash.
Well, they are good pets. I mean, they're fun to own.
Okay.
That's awesome. Maybe we'll get you guys hooked up later and you can talk.
Okay, absolutely. She'd be welcome to come by and try him out before you thought about it. But
before you buy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Wow. Well, so we'll see. I had another object up here on my desk while I was out of the office. We might unbox that one next week, because you never know. But very cool. Appreciate you sharing that.
Sure, no problem.
Well, we've got one other thing I'm going to do not do screen share, and I'm going to reach over here. Last week I promised we'd do a walking stick update. Remember, this was over 2 months ago, I think I shared our walking stick insect. Here she is. So this is not a native species of walking stick, although we do have in this area, we have the northern walking stick. They're actually, we've had a freeze now, so I don't know how many of them are still up in the trees. They're really hard to spot. The best time to spot a walking stick around here is in this, after a windy day or after a rainy day, when they get knocked down out of the trees where their camouflage is, and they then come and they land on a screen, or they land on the porch railing, or they're on your garage door. They hang out in mature woods, and they feed on a lot of our hardwoods, not to the point where they're pests, but our oaks, our hickories support in pretty good populations of northern walking sticks. But as I said, we wanted to have a walking stick display at the Nature Center, and this goes back to when I worked at Red Oak Nature Center. So we're talking probably over 15 years ago. I took a couple of northern walking sticks that had come down after a storm, and I put them together. I had a male and a female. Male walking sticks have two clasping organs at the tip of their abdomen. So you look for a kind of a C shape at the bottom of the abdomen. And then the females don't have that. So that's how you tell them apart. So I had a male and a female, put them together, they mated, they laid eggs, but then nothing happened. So I don't know, there was something wrong with my walking stick husbandry. But I talked to another nature center, the Grove up in Glenview, and they said, oh, well, what you need are these Vietnamese walking sticks. What these guys, or what these gals do, is they reproduce parthenogenically, which means they do not have a male that they mate with. They are able to produce fertile eggs on their own, and they only produce more females. So these sticks, I think I got the first group of about 6 in 2000 and let's say 2003, 2004. And they were, about 2 inches long when I got them. They get up to this size. Now this girl she's not counting her legs, she's about 5 inches long. The legs make her quite a bit longer. When they get to this size, they're mature, and this is when they lay their eggs. She lives in a terrarium that's got a soil-based substrate, and she lays her eggs, and just about the time, I don't want her to hear this part, she's not going to be here too much longer. They last about 6 to 8 months, and right about the time her eggs start to hatch, she expires. So the other day I was feeding, so I feed her the same things that our native walking sticks eat. I pick oak leaves. She actually did really well this summer on chokecherry leaves. We have a chokecherry bush outside of the office here. So she's been feeding on chokecherry. In the winter time, because there is the next generation is going to be happening when we don't have leaves on the trees. Then I feed them romaine lettuce. But anyway, I was spritzing water in the enclosure, and lo and behold, what do I find? But the next generation. Let me bring her over here. Can you see what's on this leaf? I'm gonna actually, let me put it on my finger here. The eggs are starting to hatch, and we're getting, oh, come on, Miss Pam. Oh, she's on my, there's 2 of them on my keyboard. Okay. So they are really, really tiny at this point. Can we see that? We should have rehearsed this. They're so fragile too. All right, I'm going to try to hold that up. Can you see the little baby walking stick? There we go. So looks bigger on the camera than it is in real life. This is not quite an inch long. And this baby walking stick is probably a week old. So we've got the next generation that's beginning. So this is a little bit different. These are a tropical species, as I said, they're from Vietnam. And this life cycle is a little bit different from what we see with our native sticks. The native sticks have finished laying their eggs. They do a kind of a cool thing, the northern walking stick. The egg has a little bit of an enticement on it, a little strip of fat and sugar that ants find attractive. So much the same way ants will sometimes, plants will sometimes put a strip of fat and sugar on a seed so that an ant will carry it away. The northern walking stick does that with their eggs. The eggs get carried down into anthills where they can survive the winter, and then they hatch. And the ants don't eat they don't destroy the egg, they just eat the fat and sugar on the outside, and they leave the egg to hatch on its own in the springtime. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a little update because we talked about these walking sticks before, and we only had one survive. In the change at Hickory Knolls, moving my office over here to the marketing department, the walking stick enclosure got a little neglected, and we just had one stick survive from the last round. And I thought, boy, if she doesn't have it, I'm gonna have, you know, over 15 years of maintaining these sticks go down the drain. So I was really excited to find out that not only did she mature and start laying eggs, but now she's producing babies too. So I got to keep track. There's 2 on my keyboard here. I want to make sure I don't lose them. But anyway, walking sticks are very cool, and they're definitely a part of our local ecology. Remember to look for our northern walking sticks. Usually by about end of July and into August. They're large enough that you can actually spot them when they blow down out of the trees after a storm. If you're really good